It was midnight when my phone lit up. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Marcus. My best friend since high school. He never called this late unless something was seriously wrong. I picked up on the second ring. "Tony!" His voice was shaking. "I need you to do me a favor." A big one. I sat up in bed and asked, "What's going on? Can you check on my mom? Please. Right now." My heart started racing. "Is she okay? What happened?" There was a moment of silence, the kind that makes your chest feel tight. Then he said the words that made everything clear. "My dad left her tonight. For someone younger, someone from his office." The air felt heavy, like the room suddenly got smaller. I had known Marcus's parents for 6 years. His dad, Richard, was loud and confident. Expensive watches, big laughs, always talking at barbecues. His mom, Tiffany, was different. Quiet, gentle, always smiling, always making sure everyone had enough food. She remembered your birthday. She asked how your job interview went. She made you feel like you mattered. And now she was alone. In that big house, at midnight. "I'm 2 states away for work," Marcus said. "I can't get there until tomorrow afternoon. Please, Tony, just make sure she's okay." I was already putting on my shoes. I told him I'm on my way. The drive to their house took 12 minutes. I had been there 100 times before, for birthdays, holidays, and random weekends, when Marcus and I stayed up late playing video games in the basement. But tonight, the house felt different. The porch light was on, the driveway was empty, and Richard's car was gone. I parked on the street and walked up the steps. My footsteps sounded louder than usual on the wooden porch. I knocked softly at first, then a little harder. No answer. I texted Marcus and told him I was there, but she wasn't answering. He replied almost instantly and told me to try the side door since it was usually unlocked. I walked around the house. The motion sensor light flickered on, and the door opened easily. I stepped inside. I called out her name and told her it was me, that Marcus had sent me to check on her. There was no reply. Then I heard it, a small sound, like someone trying very hard not to cry. I followed the sound into the living room, and that's when I saw her. She was sitting on the couch in the dark, still wearing the same blue dress from dinner. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she was staring at nothing. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes were red and her face was pale. She forced a small smile and told me I didn't have to come. I sat down across from her and told her yes, I did. For a long time, neither of us said anything. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone whose whole world just collapsed? Eventually, she spoke. She told me he hadn't even packed a bag. He just left, saying he needed to be happy again, that he finally felt alive. Her voice cracked when she said it. I told her I was sorry, but she shook her head. She said she should have seen it coming. The late nights, the new cologne, the way he stopped looking at her when she talked. She wiped her eyes and said that somewhere along the way she became invisible. She wasn't a person anymore, just a list of responsibilities. Make dinner, do laundry, keep the house running. And when someone younger came along, someone without gray hair or tired eyes, he chose her. The pain in her voice was so raw it hurt to hear. I told her she wasn't invisible. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I told her she was one of the kindest people I'd ever met. That she had always made me feel welcome, always made people feel like they mattered. A tear rolled down her cheek, and she asked me why she wasn't enough. I didn't have an answer, so I stayed quiet, and I stayed there. After a while, she stood up and said she couldn't stay in the house that night. She couldn't sleep in that bed or look at the pictures on the wall. She said she needed to leave. She looked at me and asked me to take her anywhere at all, as long as it wasn't there. I didn't hesitate. I told her okay. She grabbed her purse, I grabbed my keys, and we left. I didn't have a plan. I just started driving. For the first 20 minutes, we didn't say anything. The city lights faded behind us and the road stretched out ahead. Then I remembered a place Marcus had once told me about, a small lodge his family used to visit when he was a kid, about 2 hours north, quiet and surrounded by woods. I asked her if she wanted to go. She didn't look at me, but she nodded and said yes. So I kept driving. We stopped at a gas station around 2 in the morning. I filled the tank while she went inside and came back with 2 coffees and a bag of chips. I told her she didn't have to do that, but she handed me a coffee and said it was the least she could do since I was driving. It was the first normal thing she'd said all night. Back on the road, somewhere around 3 in the morning, she asked me why I was doing this. I told her because she needed help, and I was available. She said most people wouldn't do this, that most people would have just sent a text or called the next morning. I told her I wasn't most people. She smiled just a little and said no, I wasn't. We arrived just before sunrise. The lodge was small and quiet, surrounded by trees and a calm lake. The man at the front desk didn't ask questions. He just handed us a key and told us which cabin was ours. The air smelled like pine and fresh water as we walked down the gravel path. The cabin was simple. 1 bedroom, a small living room with a fireplace, and a tiny kitchen. She stood in the doorway and said it was perfect. I told her to take the bed and said I'd sleep on the couch. She told me I didn't have to stay, but I said I was staying. She didn't argue. When she went into the bedroom, I sat on the couch staring at the ceiling, wondering what we were doing and whether I was helping or making things worse. I didn't have answers. So I closed my eyes and waited for the sun to come up. When I woke up, the cabin smelled like coffee. She was in the kitchen, pouring 2 cups. She looked different that morning. Still tired, but less broken, more present. We sat at the small table by the window, watching the lake as the sun rose. She thanked me for everything, and I told her she didn't have to. She said she did, because I hadn't had to do any of this. But I did anyway. She told me she'd spent 25 years being someone's wife and someone's mother, and in one night she lost half of that. She said the scariest part was not knowing who she was without it. I told her maybe this was her chance to find out. She smiled for the first time since I'd arrived at her house and asked me to call her Tiffany. After breakfast, we walked the trail around the lake. The air was cool, the trees were thick, and the only sounds were birds and gravel under our feet. After a while, she asked me if I thought she was too old to start over. She told me she didn't have a career or hobbies anymore, that everything she'd done had been for her family, and now she felt like she didn't exist. I told her she did exist, and that she was stronger than she thought. I reminded her that she chose to leave the house instead of staying and waiting. She cried, but she nodded. We kept walking. By the time we got back, something had changed. The sadness was still there, but it wasn't as heavy. We ate sandwiches on the porch overlooking the lake. She told me it felt strange to sit without an agenda, without anyone needing anything from her. I told her she should do it more often. Later, she told me she felt safe with me, that when I looked at her, she felt like she mattered. She reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. That night, we sat by the fireplace. She leaned her head on my shoulder and asked if it was okay. I told her it was. When she said she didn't want to be alone that night, I understood what she was asking. I knew how complicated it was, but when I looked at her, I didn't see someone who needed saving. I saw someone who needed to be seen. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. She kissed me and I kissed her back. It wasn't about lust. It was about closeness, about feeling human again. The next morning, we drove back in silence, but it was peaceful this time. When we reached her house, she asked what would happen next. I told her I didn't know, but that she would be okay. Weeks later, I received a letter from her. She wrote that I hadn't saved her, but reminded her that she was worth saving. I folded the letter and smiled, because sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone isn't to fix them. It's just to be there. After a few days, I kept in touch with Tiffany. Simple messages at first, just checking in, asking how she was feeling. Sometimes she didn't reply for hours, sometimes she wrote long paragraphs. I didn't mind. I wanted her to feel she had space. One evening, she called. I could hear her voice trembling, but there was a warmth there too. "Tony, I went for a walk today," she said, "by myself, around the park near the lake." "That's great," I replied. "How did it feel?" She paused. Scary and freeing at the same time. I realized I hadn't walked alone in years. It felt like I could breathe again. I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. "That's a start." We talked for nearly an hour, about small things. Her favorite books, the coffee she had bought that morning, a silly memory from her work. Normal things. Things that had been buried under years of routine and heartbreak. Over the next week, she started leaving the house more. Short trips to the grocery store, visiting a small cafe by the lake. Each time she came back, she seemed lighter, more herself. One night, she invited me over, not because she needed me, but because she wanted to share something. I arrived to find her in the living room, candles lit, soft music playing. She was smiling, really smiling. "I signed up for a painting class," she said, holding a piece of paper. "It starts next week. I haven't painted since I was a teenager." "That's amazing, Tiffany," I said. "You should do it. For yourself." "I am," she said softly. "I think I'm ready to do things for me now." The first few weeks were simple, ordinary moments. Coffee in the mornings, walks by the lake, late night talks about memories and dreams. She started to remember herself outside the roles she had been trapped in. One evening, while watching the sunset, she turned to me. "Tony, do you ever think about Marcus?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," I replied. "But I think right now it's not about anyone else. It's about you, about what you want." She nodded. Her eyes reflected the pink and orange sky. "I feel like I'm starting over. Like I'm someone I didn't know I could be." I didn't say anything. There was no need. I just watched her, letting her take it all in. Over time, Tiffany grew bolder. She started organizing small trips on her own. She signed up for painting workshops. She even volunteered at a local library helping with art programs for children. Each new thing was a quiet victory, and she began to smile more naturally. One rainy afternoon, she called me unexpectedly. "Tony, I painted something," she said. "I want you to see it." I walked into her house and she held up a canvas. It was a landscape of the lake at sunrise, colors vivid and full of life. "I didn't follow instructions," she admitted, laughing lightly. "I just painted what I felt." "You captured it perfectly," I told her. "This is you." She looked at me, eyes shining. "It feels like me again, like I exist for myself, not just for everyone else." Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Tiffany and I spent more time together, but always slowly, always naturally. There was no rush, no pressure. just quiet companionship. One weekend, she invited me to a small art show she had organized with her class. Seeing her so proud, sharing her work, laughing with new friends, it was a revelation. She had grown so much in just a few months. After the show, we walked to the lake. The air was crisp, and the sun was low on the horizon. "You know," she said, "I never thought I could feel this alive again." "You always could," I said. "You just needed permission to remember it." She smiled, a soft, real smile. "And you gave me that." For the first time since that midnight phone call, I felt the weight of the past lift. Watching her reclaim herself, I realized that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone isn't saving them or fixing them. It's showing up and being present when it matters most. And that's exactly what she needed. That night I couldn't sleep. The room was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about how close everything had come to breaking. How one phone call, one drive, one decision could have changed so many lives. I stepped outside onto the balcony. The city lights flickered in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were laughing, arguing, living their normal lives. And for the first time in a long while, Tiffany was one of them again. I checked my phone. No messages. And that was okay. Some people don't need constant words. They just need to know someone is there if the night gets too heavy. I thought about Marcus, about the years we spent growing up, the mistakes he made, the silence he left behind. I realized something then. I didn't need answers anymore. I didn't need apologies. I had done what I could. And sometimes, that has to be enough. I went back inside and sat on the edge of the bed. The letter she had written weeks ago was still in my drawer. I hadn't read it again since that first time. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. The next morning came quietly. No dramatic sunrise, no big moment, just another day starting. And that was the point. Life doesn't always change in loud ways. Sometimes it shifts gently, almost without you noticing. A few months later, Tiffany sent me a photo. It was her painting hanging in a small local gallery. Underneath it, a little white card with her name printed neatly. I stared at the picture longer than I expected. She hadn't needed saving. She had needed space, time, and someone who didn't walk away when things got uncomfortable. I replied with a simple message. "I'm proud of you." She replied a few minutes later. "I finally am too." That night, I went for a walk. Alone. The air was cool, the streets calm. I realized I felt lighter. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had stopped trying to control outcomes. I had learned something important. You can't fix people. You can't heal them by force. You can't carry their pain for them. But you can sit with them in the dark. You can listen. You can stay. And sometimes, that's the thing that changes everything.